Now, I want to give a shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. This was a discussion on Fox Business about socialism in America. And you know, they try to paint this as like the evil boogeyman, or this is the Skeletor that's coming to get us. For those who don't know, if you've never seen He-Man, He-Man's villain was Skeletor. And yeah, He-Man used to say, by the power of Grayskull, He-Man. Anywho, they're talking about socialism in a negative way. And I want to play this clip before I get into the Richard Wolff piece where he breaks down socialism, because I have noticed something when I hear people critique socialism. They tend to talk about it as if it's only one type of thing, where there are different types of socialism that need to be discussed. And they don't do that. Case in point, listen to this segment right here.
There is a growing segment of the American population that is embracing socialism. I mean, it's almost hard to believe that they see this as a viable alternative to capitalism, a means to prosperity, the new American dream. So I had to dig in and do a little research on what people are saying about this, and Pew Research polls on this constantly. Their latest survey revealed that 60% of registered Democrats today and Democratic leaders have a positive view on socialism. That's nearly 2/3 of the party. You should keep that in mind, because that's where their thinking is. All while enjoying the benefits of capitalism. They're sitting in their cushy chairs in a capitalist society thinking and tweeting out that socialism is great. I do think, going back to your comment about it being a dream, that somehow this is a combination of virtue signaling and fantasy land that they've built up in their minds and in the youngest generation. So think about it. They're saying in a time of economic peril that they want more government in their lives. When the economic perils that we're all living through today, you and I talked about it last night, you've got more Americans working 2 full-time jobs to pay for 40-year high inflation. I mean, you've got incredible economic policy problems that have been created by this administration, and now a Federal Reserve tasked with bringing those prices down because of huge government involvement and huge government spending. So we have to ask ourselves how they're defining socialism, and I think that's a really important question in all of this. And when Gallup dug in to those who support socialism or go on the record saying they support socialism and want that for this country, you'd be shocked to see that 25%, when we're asked with an open space question how they define it, did not have an answer. And that's really important, that they're supporting something that they don't understand. And by the way, while they're asking for equality, equality is obviously a huge word that they virtue signal with this constantly, the message should be equal opportunity for all.
Yes.
Did she not just make the case for us? Let's go through this.
There is a growing segment of the American population that is embracing socialism. I mean, it's almost hard to believe that they...
And why is that? Why is it that more people are starting to embrace socialism? Could be because capitalism is not working out for them. Could be because they've been a part of this crowd that has worked multiple jobs and they're still struggling to get by. I know people working 2 jobs still struggle to pay their rent. Remember, rent does increase. Maybe that's why more people are starting to embrace socialism, because they've tried it this way. Then you have some of us who did what we were told to do well in school. Then you can get into college, go to college so that you won't have to struggle financially, so that you can get a job that's going to pay you enough where you won't have to worry about those financial struggles, right? How's that working out for a lot of people? How's that working out for everybody that has these large amount of student loan debt? Not working out too great for a lot of people. Also considering the people who went to school and majored in one field, and by the time they graduated from college, that field was no longer profitable. Should also mention that part too. Not everybody gets to have a cushy job on Fox Business like they do. In fact, most people don't. Let's go on. Let her talk more.
See this as a viable alternative to capitalism, a means to prosperity, the new American dream. So I had to dig in and do a little research on what people are saying about this, and Pew Research polls on this constantly. Their latest survey revealed that 60% of registered Democrats today and Democratic leaders have a positive view on socialism. That's nearly 2/3 of the party. You should keep that in mind, because that's where their thinking is, all while enjoying.
Notice how she divides this based on the two-party system, because not everybody who embraces socialism, not everybody who considers themselves to be a socialist is a Democrat. I'm not a Democrat. I'm a registered independent. What about those people? You see what I mean? You see what they're trying to do here? They're trying to make it seem like, oh my God, the Democratic Party is moving towards socialism. Really? That doesn't seem to be the case. If they were moving towards socialism, we'd have health care for everyone in this country. If they were moving towards socialism, we'd have paid leave towards everybody in this country. We'd have universal pre-K. We'd have all these things that countries like Germany and Denmark and Sweden have. We would have those policies. The Democratic Party is a right-wing party. Over the years, the Democratic Party has moved further and further to the right, not to the left. And they know that. You can't tell me that these panelists, all of these experts per se, don't know what is really happening. They're just on there saying what they're paid to say. Keep that in mind.
The benefits of capitalism. They're sitting in their cushy chairs in a capitalist society thinking and tweeting out that socialism is great. I do think, going back to your comment about it being a dream, that somehow this is a combination of virtue signaling and fantasy land that they've built up in their minds and in the youngest generation. So think about it. They're saying in a time of economic peril that they want more government in their lives. When the economic perils that we're all living through today, you and I talked about it last night.
More government in their lives. So when people mention this, I like to point out the police state. Because when it comes to the police, both Republicans and Democrats agree with funding the police more. The only person that I've seen that was still holding firm on defund the police, that's in DC, is Cori Bush. And she's not even allowed to talk about it anymore. So what does that tell you? What does that tell you about the Democratic Party? So for people that say you're a socialist, you want big government in your life, I don't agree with that. But then those same people agree with funding the police more. They're the same people say back the blue. They're the same people that say, yeah, we need more cops. Isn't that big government? When people tell you that, come back at them, hit them with that. Hit them with that. That makes no sense. It's not really about big government. Do you see what I mean? Policing is the most important example that you can point to when they complain about people wanting big government, because they want big government too when they want to fund the police more. They want big government too when they say we need more cops on the street. We need more cops in those communities. They also want big government, boo. They just don't want you to know that that's what it's called in reference to the police as well. Interesting.
You've got more Americans working 2 full-time jobs to pay for 40-year high inflation. I mean, you've got incredible economic policy problems that have been created by this administration, and now a Federal Reserve tasked with bringing those prices down.
Let's talk about the 2-job portion that she touches on here. You know, it's interesting because she makes it seem like people just started working 2 jobs. That only until inflation happened this year, people just now started working 2 jobs. People have been working 2 jobs, sometimes 3 jobs, as long as I've been alive. As long as I've been alive. I was one of those people that worked 2 jobs before. We didn't have a pandemic then. We didn't have inflation at that point. So this was already a problem. So if you remove the inflation piece and you focus on the topic that she's bringing up here about working 2 jobs, what is to blame for that when you don't have inflation? What is to blame for that when you don't have a pandemic? What is the reason why in the wealthiest country in the world, people in this country have to work multiple jobs, and that is just to get by, just to pay their rent, just to pay their other bills, just to maybe pay to put their kid in daycare so they can work those 2 jobs? What is the reason for that? If it's not for inflation, if it's not for a pandemic, what else can you point to? Capitalism. What else can you point to for all of the workers that are going on strike, for the unionizing that is starting, for the workers being exploited? That's capitalism. This is the problem that I have with this. This is the problem.
Because of huge government involvement and huge government spending. So we have to ask ourselves how they're defining socialism. And I think that's a really important question in all of this. And when Gallup dug into those who support socialism or go on the record saying they support socialism and want that for this country, you'd be shocked to see that 25%, when we're asked with an open space question how they define it, did not have an answer. And that's
But the way that she's defining it isn't right either. That's the thing. That's the problem. It's like, I can't.
really important, that they're supporting something that they don't understand.
And you're supporting capitalism, and I don't think you understand that. Actually, I take that back. I think she does understand, but she's paid to say something different. She's paid. When has capitalism worked for everybody in this country? Let me know. It doesn't work for most. It works for few. That's why there was that push for an Occupy Wall Street. That's why there was that message about the 99% versus the 1%, because the majority of us are the ones being exploited. Strange.
And by the way, while they're asking for equality is obviously a huge word that they virtue signal with this constantly. The message should be equal opportunity for all.
Yes.
Equal opportunity for all should be the message, is what she's saying. Let's talk about equal opportunity, for example. You can have equal opportunity, but people can still be underpaid. You can have a company policy that says you don't discriminate based on age, race, sex, gender. A lot of companies have that written somewhere on their application, on their website. That's cool. But that doesn't mean you're not underpaid. That doesn't mean you're not paid what you're worth when you have people making $7.25 an hour. So just because you had the opportunity to get your foot in the door, that doesn't mean you're being paid what you're supposed to be paid to make a living in this country. And it's funny that she brought up equal opportunity, because then they'll be the first ones to tell you, oh, don't talk about race and gender. Don't talk about that. That's too woke. Don't talk about that. That's identity politics. But she's talking about equal opportunity. Richard Wolff breaks down socialism pretty well. I'm going to bring him up on the screen because I want you to connect what she was saying to what Richard Wolff defines the 3 basic types of socialism. Now, Richard Wolff is really good at this, of course. This is what he does. And this is from Democracy at Work. Listen to what he has to say here. And quick shout out to people. Go ahead and hit that like button if you didn't have a chance to do so. I'm trying to get better about that, you guys. But listen to what Professor Wolff has to say here about socialism.
I wish I could sit here and tell you that this is the definition of socialism. But if I did such a thing, you should turn the program off and go elsewhere. Because anybody who tells you that this is socialism is either ignorant or misleading you.
Ha ha ha. Someone please tell that Fox News commentator that point right there.
Socialism has been around for 150 years. It has spread all over the world, and the end result, inevitably, is that different people mean different things by that term. Look, capitalism is what we call the economy in the United States. It's also what the leaders of Saudi Arabia call their economic system. And it's also what the people in Ireland call theirs, and it's also what the people in Nigeria call theirs. Therefore, it obviously means different things to different people.
Well, well, well. Did you hear that? So when she says that, well, 25% can't even define what it is, it means different things to different people. Here we go.
So I want to devote this program to going over with you the three major ways this idea of socialism is understood, because those ways are relevant today. Those ways are fighting it out amongst themselves in terms of the allegiance and feelings and thoughts of people around the world. And they're going to shape our future. So here's the first one. In this view, socialism has to do with the government. That's right. The government is to come in and regulate, control a private capitalist economy. That's right. An economy governed by private enterprises owned by private citizens who trade with one another in an institution called the market, where they buy and sell their labor, their work, their products, their services. That's right. It's a capitalist economy, private enterprise, markets, but one in which the government is brought in. Some people mean socialism by that. And they mean particularly that the government is brought in a certain way. Number one, the government is to regulate what the private enterprises do so that they are less self-serving, profit-oriented, and are more socially concerned. That's why minimum wage is something socialists always supported. Many of them want there to be limits on how much prices can be raised by corporations or how much profits can be earned by them.
I have no disagreement with there being this issue about prices being raised by corporations. I wish we did have some type of regulation on that. Look at what people are going through right now. Have you seen the grocery store prices? We all went through like the gas like increase that we had to deal with if you drive a car. So that's what happens when there's no type of regulation. So you had people like Joe Biden talking to the oil companies, telling them to lower the prices, to not raise it or whatever. But under socialism, that wouldn't have even been an issue. You see the problem? You see how they can just continue to increase the price and things like that. If you're also looking at, I'll tell you this, these food delivery services, you should see the fees that they're charging right now this year. It's crazy. Grubhub, DoorDash, you should see all the fees, how the fees have increased, people increasing the price of food in the grocery stores. And there's no limit because there's no regulation over it. There's nothing to stop it.
And the second reason socialists want the government to come in is to redistribute wealth, because capitalism has this tendency to concentrate wealth in very few hands and deprive the mass of people. So the socialists want the government to come in using taxes and using government spending to do a bit of redistribution, to equalize a system that turns unequal very quickly.
To equalize a system that turns unequal. So the commentator spoke about equal opportunity, but like I told you, You can still have equal opportunity, but that doesn't mean that everyone is still being treated equal under that opportunity. That doesn't mean that certain people are underpaid. That doesn't mean that certain people aren't getting benefits based on certain things. And these things happen. That's why you see workers out here fighting for strikes. You see workers out here fighting to start a union because obviously, yeah, they had the equal opportunity to get their foot in the door, but how were they treated once they got there? So there's a difference between providing equal opportunity and everybody being equal. There's a difference between that.
So for these people, socialism means that the government comes in, regulates and taxes to make what we might call capitalism, because it leaves business in the hands of private enterprises and markets, but we could call it capitalism with a humane face, capitalism with a certain welfare focus, the welfare of all the people. And here are some examples. Denmark, Norway, Germany, Italy, France. Those countries are often referred to as socialist. Their governments are often governments of socialist parties, and that's what those parties mean, that they will have the government do this regulating and redistributing. That's one concept of socialism around the world. It's pretty close to what Bernie Sanders means in the United States, or what Jerry.
And that's why Bernie Sanders would always point to those countries. I hope everyone understands that. That's why Bernie would point to like a Norway or Denmark, because that's what he was referring to in reference to democratic socialism, although Bernie's more of a social democrat per se. But that's one type. Now, he's going to tell you about the other two.
Jeremy Corbyn means in Great Britain. But here's the second one. In the second view, this first one doesn't go far enough. Because yes, the government comes in and controls things and redistributes, but it's in a perpetual war, which the government often loses with those very private enterprises who try to get around the government regulation, who try to get around the government taxation. We're all familiar with those examples of companies, for example, Amazon, which has earned billions in profits the last 2 years and paid absolutely no taxes to the United States government. Indeed, this last year, they're getting a refund in excess of $100 million. So we know that private corporations do everything in their power to use their profits, to use their political power, to undo, to evade, all of those socialistic regulations and redistributions. And this has led some socialists to say you have to go further. It isn't enough to regulate and redistribute. The government should, here we go, directly take over the enterprises. There shouldn't be private enterprises because those will always be run for the profit of the private owner. If you want the economy to serve everybody, then the agent of everybody, the government that we all elect, at least in theory, should take over and run the businesses so they behave in the way that's good for everybody, and there isn't this perpetual war between a regulating government and private enterprise. And the same argument says we shouldn't allow the market to decide who gets what, because a market always delivers whatever is scarce to the people with the most money. It's a institution for those who are rich and who stay that way by using the market. So these socialists go further. The government should take over enterprises, literally own and operate the factories, stores, and offices. And instead of the market deciding who gets what, it should be planned in terms of what we want for the society as a whole.
Pop quiz. What is that called? I'll do my little Jeopardy bell, little Jeopardy tune. Do 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 do. Nobody seems to know the answer in the chat. Here we go.
These kinds of socialists.
That's right, Casey. Casey, for the win. You get $100. Do you want to play on? That's right. This type is communism. There's different types here. I'm going to let Professor Wolff go on, but Casey, you're a rock star. You're going home with the win for tonight.
After the 1920s, took the name communists to signal that they went further than the other socialists in order to take over, through the government, the apparatus of the economy. So some people mean by socialism government regulating a private capitalism to make it more humane, to make it less unequal. And other people say, no, socialism means, for them, that the government takes over the enterprise and plans the distribution of output rather than leaving it to the market. And this second group of socialists often, not always, but often takes the name communist to show how they're different from the first group.
And remember, communism comes from the word community. So it's all about the community. Now, here's the problem. This is where people like that Fox News commentator that you saw and the one that you saw previously before that in the other segment about Hillary Clinton, this is where they will mistakenly, or maybe they're doing it on purpose, but this is where they will mistakenly compare Bernie Sanders, AOC, and all the other progressives in DC. They will compare them to this type of socialism. That's actually not where they're at. They're at the first type of socialism, which Professor Wolff talked about in the beginning, the Denway, Denway. I can't talk tonight. The Denmark, the Norway type of socialism. That's where they are. But a lot of times when you hear people critiquing them on mainstream media, they are critiquing them and referring to them as the communist type of socialism. They're not there yet. They're not all the way at that point. But there's one more type. Let's go back in.
And in those kinds of examples, the Soviet Union, the People's Republic of China, and for parts of their history, Cuba, Vietnam, and so on, are examples. Now let's get to the third kind of socialism that's contesting in the world today. To become the important kind, to become the kind believed in and followed by most people, to win your interest as well. And this approach is in a way an evolution out of the other two. It's a kind of critical evolution because it is advanced by people who see some merits in the first kind of socialism, government regulation, the second kind, government operating enterprises, but say, we don't think that's enough in one way and it's too much in the other. Here's how it's not enough. It's not enough because it doesn't change the workplace, the place where the mass of people do their economic thing, using their brains and muscles to transform objects into the goods and services we all need to live the lives we want to live. It doesn't change it enough. Meanwhile, it does something too much. It gives too much power to the government. As a government that has this much power to regulate and redistribute, let alone a government that takes over owning and operating, is a government that runs us the risk that it'll do a lot more than these economic things, using its power for political or cultural controls of a society that we have seen and we don't want again. Well, then these kinds of socialists have a new focus. For them, what will really make a difference, what will take us beyond capitalism and be a better way of organizing society, focuses on the enterprise, the workplace. And it goes like this. We have the economic system we have, with its good points and its bad points, in large part because we don't allow democracy into the workplace. And these socialists say, capitalism never did that. Capitalism is a hierarchical way of organizing an enterprise. A few people, the owner, the shareholders who have the big blocks of shares, they run capitalist enterprises. The mass of us have no control at all, and they run it for them. And the way to change society to make it better is to have the people who work in an enterprise, all of them, one person, one vote, have democratic control of the workplace as just as important as having democratic control of the community in which you live, the neighborhood in which you exist, and so on. This kind of socialism is micro-focused. It says, let's not talk only about the government and private enterprise. We don't mind private enterprise. The government doesn't have to control everything. There has to be some coordination. But the big issue for us, say these socialists, is the transformation of the workplace, the socialization of the workplace, so it becomes a community run democratically rather than something run by a small number of people who put their benefits, the so-called bottom line, as profits for them rather than a good life for everybody. Okay, those kinds of socialism are arguing with one another for your attention and your allegiance. To be interested in socialism doesn't mean you're necessarily the believer of one or the other. Most real socialist societies have mingled the control function of government with the ownership function of government. What most experiments have not done is really tried that other kind of socialism that revolutionizes the workplace, brings democracy to the workplace for the first time, and says that's the way to get beyond the limits of capitalism, its inequalities, its instabilities, its injustices. So the question that's being fought out is not the question capitalism versus socialism, or at least it's not only that. It's also a struggle going on among these different definitions and meanings of socialism that are just as important to what's going on as the so-called struggle between capitalism and socialism that was so crucial in the last 100 years.
If you want to hear more about this video is a lot longer. It's called Economic Update, 3 Basic Kinds of Socialism. And that's on Democracy at Work if you want to hear the rest. But I think the point that Richard Wolff really drives home is that depending on who you talk to, socialism means different things. He just told you about 3 different types of socialism there. But oftentimes what I have noticed, when the media discusses socialism, they're usually criticizing it. And when they're doing so, they're usually referring to the second kind of socialism that he mentioned, which is communism. And that is not where progressives in DC are when they say that they are socialists. They refer to themselves as democratic socialists. Some people will say you're actually a social democrat per se. They are not at that point of communism. So you'll hear Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC will make those same kind of statements and make it seem like they're communists. They're just they're crazy radicals. They're trying to come over and lean us towards that way. That is not exactly true. And I think it's important for people to hear that. So the segment that you just heard from that clip from Case Study QB, where the Fox News host was trying to say they just want the big government to just come in and like that is more of like a Red Scare tactic, which people have used in the past during the McCarthy era. And people are using that again, heavily more so now, because they do see that polls do show, especially with the younger generation, more people are leaning towards socialism or embracing socialism. And that's probably because generations like mine, like millennials, people who are Gen Z, those of us have been really hit hard economically, especially if you graduated during the time of the 2008 housing crisis. All of us that entered the workforce during that time, it was very difficult to get ahead and to get a good start. And this is why a lot of us still have a lot of student loan debt, like, to be honest with you. So I think it's important that we talk about the different types of socialism and what they're referring to in mainstream media. And like I said before, this is more of a Red Scare tactic that they are trying to use. They want people to be afraid so people will push back against it, because let's be real. a lot of these people, the 1%, people who are wealthy and may not be a part of the 1%, they don't want socialism because they don't want everybody to have what they have. They don't want to have less, and they don't want you to have more. And that's important for you to note. Some people like having a comfortable lifestyle. They like living in their secluded, gated communities and neighborhoods, and they don't want everybody to be welcomed. They want it to be people who are like them. They want it to be people who are in their same class. And that's important for people to understand. I'm going to go to some of the comments here. I see I got a couple super chats. So let's do the thing. Lawrence says, if you haven't seen Skeletor, just look at James Carville. That's cold, Lawrence. That's cold. John H. He-Man. That's right, He-Man. That cartoon was a trip. JB, my comrade from RBN, says capitalists think socialism means more government, when in reality, it's more worker power. That's right. But they don't really want the workers to have power. That's the thing. Jay says, it's so funny how these conservatives represent corporations, try to gaslight you by saying big government when corporations own big government. Bingo. Bingo. JB says, when you want to know what socialism is, ask a socialist. When you want to know how capitalism works, ask a socialist. That is so true. That's so true. Those are all good points. Delthea, whenever you critique capitalism, right-wingers sound like a cheating boyfriend saying things like, why you want to bring up old shit? That's a good one. I like that, Delthea. That's a good one. Chris Legion is in the house. How do we convince every senior citizen who watches Fox News to realize that Fox News doesn't know anything about socialism? You can point them towards Richard Wolff. That's what you can do. Thank you for the super chat, Steve. Sabby, so this news lady in red doesn't plan on cashing her Social Security checks? I doubt it. That's a good point, Steve. Yeah, I guess she doesn't care about that Social Security when it comes through. Thank you for the super sticker, Saul. Thanks so much for that. And Roman says, if socialism is so bad, why are the oligarchs hoarding it for themselves? Ooh, they have socialism for the rich. They just don't want us to have socialism.